New analysis shows that foreign nationals arriving on small boats are responsible for an unexpected and shocking rise in serious crimes, including sexual offences, theft, robbery and arson. I'm delighted to welcome Robert Bates, the director of the Centre for Migration Control, who has the figures. Robert, welcome to the show.
Evening, Mark. Good to see you back in the chair.
Oh, thank you so much. Great to be back at the home of common sense. Tell me about some of the details of this report and what it reveals about migrant crime.
Yeah, so our report shows the increase that we've seen in convictions, especially sexual offence convictions of foreign nationals between 2021 and 2024. So really from when the Conservative Party embarked on their post-Brexit immigration system up until last year. And what it really does show is the scale of the increase that the immigration system we've had imposed on us by the Conservative Party has led to. A 62% increase in foreign national convictions for sexual offences. For other offences, it's a lot higher. Across the board for non-summary offences, it is 20%. And certain nationalities really stick out when you look at the increase in sexual offences. So India, for instance, has seen a 257% increase in the number of convictions for sexual offences. Bangladesh, 100%. So this is clearly a huge problem. And then when we look at those nationalities that are overrepresented in the small boats crossings, we see an even more stark picture, which is a 110% increase. And I think that really gets down to where the conversation currently is in the country, in this sense that the hotels and the houses of multiple occupancy that those that have come across the channel have been put up in, rather than being detained, has actually led to an uptick in crime in communities. And I think when you see figures such as these, you start to understand why the British public are increasingly fed up with the way our asylum system has been operating. Now, whether the Labour Party actually have a plan to get to grips with this, it would seem not. Of course, they're very adamant they're going to be shutting down the hotels. But if that simply means moving individuals to houses are scattered around communities, and I really don't think that solves the fundamental problem here, which is that the small boats crisis is leading to an uptick in crime in the country.
Is there a danger of characterising all foreign nationals as criminals?
Well, I don't think the data does show all foreign nationals are criminals. I think what it allows us to do is to start have a conversation about how we can actually make sure that those that are coming to the country aren't committing crime. And I think we don't do enough at our borders. We don't do criminal record certificate checks on a majority of visa routes. So hundreds of thousands of people have come in legally in recent years without us even knowing their criminal record background. I think when you start talking about the illegal migration issue, these are people we don't know anything about. These could very well be people with dangerous backgrounds. We know from these statistics that they come from nationalities that are certainly overrepresented when it comes to sexual offence convictions. So I think obviously it doesn't show a blanket all foreign nationals are likely to be committing crimes, but it does show that certain nationalities are overrepresented in this statistic. And the hope would be that policymakers would look at information such as this and take it from there and start to tinker with the immigration system and make sure that it's actually keeping the British public safe, because that is the primary responsibility of the Home Office, after all.
And do we know about the split between those who have entered the country illegally, and then those who are here by way of sort of legal net migration, that overall figure of people who have successfully moved to this country? Do these figures pertain to those who have entered Britain illegally or not? Is it all foreign nationals?
It's all foreign nationals, unfortunately, and this is something that MPs such as Robert Jenrick and Reform MPs are pushing for. We need to know the immigration status of nationals committing these crimes. We need to know what visa route they've come in on. We need to know whether they've come in illegally. When it comes to those nationalities represented on the small boats, a majority of people from those nationalities are coming in the UK via those routes. So there's an inference that can be made there. But again, because the government has been so woeful at publishing this data officially, we don't really have a full picture yet. I hope what publishing this data does start is a conversation about what more needs to be collected, and the Home Office has recently indicated that it might start to publish more of this data, but I think we need it quicker, we need it sooner, and we need to start taking action immediately.
Most definitely, and it's a range of offences as you've outlined: sexual offences, theft, robbery, arson, and of course the other issue with those crossing the channel illegally, the authorities are concerned about terror links as well.
Yes, and rightly they should be. We know that we have already seen instances of Iranian terrorists coming across on the small boats, and this really is a terror organisation's sort of dream, the situation we have at the moment. About 2% of the people that come across on the small boats, 2 to 4%, we actually know who they are. We have documents that allow us to trace their history in recent years. So, terror groups will be looking at this situation and really thinking, there is an opportunity to send individuals that deliberately are going with the intent of not wanting to do the British public well and to wanting to cause harm. So I think Keir Starmer is being dragged kicking and screaming to recognising the national security and the security implications with the small boats crisis. But so long as it continues and so long as these individuals aren't being detained but are instead being scattered around communities across the country, we are likely to see the figures that we've published today and we'll continue to grow, and we are likely to see continuing horrific attacks such as have been reported in recent months.
Anyone of sound mind wants these illegal boat crossings to end. But is there a concern that a good portion of these crimes are committed by people who are legally here and who have been welcomed into the country? And if that's the case, what is the solution if that's happening?
That is a very big concern. I mean, we also know from last year that a quarter of sexual assault convictions and rape convictions were foreign nationals, and a large proportion of those individuals will be those that were welcomed in. And what we're pushing for at the Centre for Migration Control is greater vetting based on the data that we do have. And if certain nationalities do appear to be overrepresented, then we need to start putting them on what used to be called the red list in the Home Office until 2020. And they used to use the data they had on nationalities to start in carrying out increasing vetting on individuals applying to come here legally, because of course we see 750,000 have come across in the last 12 months legally. So a large proportion of foreign nationals are coming via the legal routes, but I don't think, especially when we've got a low-skilled, low-wage immigration system, we're actually doing anywhere near enough to make sure that we're only bringing in the best and the brightest and those that aren't going to cause us harm whilst they're here.
What would you say to those who argue that most crimes of all natures are committed by indigenous Brits?
The two words, per capita. So, of course, we live in a predominantly British country, so most crimes will, by their very nature, be committed by British people. But we need to look at the over-representation of certain nationalities in these statistics. So, countries such as Afghanistan and Eritrea that are 20 times more likely to be convicted of sexual offences. That's information that we know from the Ministry of Justice. These are the kind of conversations that should be had. So, of course, not everyone coming from those countries is going to be committing those crimes, but there is an increased likelihood that an individual from those countries might be committing these crimes. And that's something that an immigration system should have at its very heart. It shouldn't just be pursuing this cheap notion of GDP growth. Line goes up, everything's better. Let's actually make sure that people coming here are going to assimilate, are going to partake in society fully, and aren't going to be committing any crimes, because frankly, there shouldn't be a single migrant that's coming into the country and falling foul of our law. I think that's basic common sense, and I think the majority of the population would agree with that position.
And of course, there's another issue here, Robert, which is that we appear, based upon these statistics, to be either allowing criminals to come in via the small boats or indeed welcoming people who go on to commit crimes into this country through legal means. It's not just the folks that come in and break the law, though, is it? It's people that come from different cultures with different attitudes to women and with different attitudes to what it is to be a citizen altogether.
I think that's quite right, and I don't think we do anywhere near enough to actually have self-confidence in our ways of doing things, our norms, our cultures, our values. Instead, we allow individuals to come from certain parts of the world to bring with them their traditions and their ways of doing things that really are quite alien to how we see things in this country. And I think there's a particular problem with Middle Eastern and Asian countries where they do seem to bring a preponderance of attitudes that many of us would towards women and girls that many of us would think simply aren't appropriate. And that this has been allowed to happen because our integration and assimilation strategies have had this cultural relativism at their heart, where we've kind of thought that everyone with any cultural background is going to come and enrich us with their culture. But the simple fact of the matter is we're very lucky in this country to have attitudes and norms and values that probably are better than the most parts of the world, and we shouldn't be ashamed of saying that fact.
Robert, what is the end game for the Centre for Migration Control, if that's not a silly question? I mean, clearly you want to control migration, but where would you go with the numbers? You would obviously, in an ideal world, stop the boats unilaterally, which is the aim and the goal, the stated goal of Reform UK if they win the next election. But what about those legal numbers? I mean, would you get them down to 100k, 50k, zero?
Well, we know from polling now that the single most popular position in the country is net negative immigration, which is more people are leaving after the expiry of their visas, their work visas or their study visas, than are actually coming in. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no immigration, but it simply means that the outflows are greater than those coming in. And I think after the period of mass migration we've had over the last 5 years of, over 1 million people coming in some years, many of them low skilled, many of them on low-wage jobs, a tiny proportion of them actually coming to work. Only 14% of visas are awarded to people on work base. I think we need to start having a recalibration. We need to recognise that what we've gone through over the last 5 years was unprecedented, historically unprecedented, and therefore a measure around net negative immigration is something that I think would not only sort of help us with GDP per capita growth, but would actually also stabilise the debate for a period of time.
The elephant in the room, though, before I let you go, Robert, is that Brits are not having enough babies, are they? We don't have enough families. So we're in the throes of an ageing population. How do we square that circle without mass immigration?
Well, obviously, we need to do more to boost our birth rate, but putting that to one side, I think we also need to recognise that some of the roles that we're currently plugging with low-skilled immigration, such as in the health and social care sector, there is huge advancements in technology taking place. An ONS report from a few years ago suggested that within the next decade, about 50% of the functions within the health and social care sector could be automated. And you think about in terms of paperwork and some of the cleaning processes, there is something here that needs to be said about actually making sure we do capital investment and force those care sector homes to actually start investing in the future rather than just relying on an endless stream of cheap, low-skilled labour that ultimately costs us more in the long run.
Well, it's a false economy, isn't it? Encouraging people who are low-skilled to come into the country to plug gaps in areas like social care and elsewhere. It's a false economy because I read a stat recently that if somebody that comes here as a low-skilled worker to work in a care home, if they live to the age of 90, I think the net cost to the taxpayer is around £1 million per head, per individual. Is that right?
That's right. That's the OBR, so the government's own fiscal watchdog. That's indicative. And of course, migrants do age as well. Migrants get old, and what we will actually see is a large number of those that have come into work in the care sector. After 5 years, they get what's called indefinite leave to remain, and can then leave that sector and go and do other jobs. So the idea that we are plugging in the long term gaps is something that really is a false economy, and actually we will see a compounding of problems if we don't act soon and start forcing that innovation and that automation to take place.
Robert, great to see you again. Thank you for joining us. Robert Bates is the director of the Centre for Migration Control.